I got 6 o'clock, or actually a minute after, so we will call this meeting to order. I see everybody's present except Mr. Wagner, who's excused, and Ms. Spiros is joining us on Zoom. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, item C is a public comment period. This time the council president will recognize members of the public who have indicated a desire to address the council. Upon recognition by council president, persons may address the council first stating their name and address. The council may act on emergency matters introduced by members of the public. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak? Mr. Pinker.
Good evening, William Penker, 600 Sycamore Avenue. During the citizen comment period at your meeting on November 23, I presented a brief commentary about agenda item N. Request to support a statement that says Marshfield is a welcoming community. As noted in Mr. Bard's memo, there has been discussion among some individuals and organizations seeking widespread adoption of a statement that Marshfield is a welcoming community. The individuals and organizations were unidentified, but the statement was printed on Chamber of Commerce Marshfield Made New letterhead. And as noted in the memo, MCHS Inc. has been involved in developing the statement. No one appeared to state their support for the statement. No one appeared to offer an explanation of the who, what, when, where, why, and how for that statement. After your discussion, Mr. Witzel requested for a future meeting a clarification of the language noted in the citizen comments. I notified Mr. Witzel by email and Mr. Bard by voicemail that I would do so at your next regular meeting. In 2017, the Common Council adopted the 2017-2037 Comprehensive Plan. Within the recesses of this document is the language I referenced on November 23. We will be a city of diverse interests and values, celebrating our differences, engaging all generations, and seeking to create a feeling of belonging and a safe environment for residents and visitors. We are imaginative in addressing the evolving needs of our community, and we ensure the sense of well-being in our residents. The other statement, welcoming and embracing diversity brings new ideas, perspectives, and skills and is essential for a prosperous community. As a community, we stand for inclusion and equality for all people from all walks of life. This enriches our daily lives, supports our community's growth, and is imperative to our future success. You can do the comparison and contrast, but the comprehensive plan uses plain language, not politically correct buzzwords of a current social and political bandwagon. And by this time, you all should have received a piece of paper. You'll notice I have marked the first, the fourth, and the fifth verses. And these are from number 499 in the third edition of Choral Praise. And it appears that the contemporary Christian composer, Marty Haugen, was ahead of both statements by 27 years. As you note, all are welcome, all are welcome, all are welcome in this place. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wishes to address the council? Seeing none, we'll move on to item D, approval of the minutes of the November 23rd, 2021 regular meeting and the November 29th, 2021 budget meeting. A motion from Mr. Fisher. Okay, and a second for Mr. Fire. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, please vote. Mrs. Spiros.
Yes.
That motion carries. Item E is staff updates. We have several introductions this evening. Introduction of Stephen Wiley, City Planner, introduced by Josh Miller, Development Services Director. John.
Thank you. Good evening. I'd like to welcome Stephen Wiley. He is our new city planner. He started with us on November 22nd, so he's already into his 4th week. We've had him acclimated, getting him to the Historic Preservation Commission meeting, the West 2nd Street Planning Project Oversight Team, and others. So getting him introduced to a number of people. But I'd like to give you a little background on Stephen. He joins us from the city of Oshkosh, where he served as associate planner since March of 2020. And prior to that, he served as the assistant planner since February of 2017. Stephen's planning experience includes neighborhood planning, plan commission support, design reviews, housing and community development block grant administration, as well as work with the Landmarks Commission. Stephen holds a bachelor's degree of science in architectural studies with an urban planning certificate, along with a master of architecture and master of urban planning degrees from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. Prior to his work with the city of Oshkosh, Stephen worked at AG Architecture from June 2015 to February 2017. Stephen also has is also certified with the American Institute of Certified Planners. So with that, I'd like to welcome Stephen Wiley as city planner.
Welcome, Stephen. Second is an introduction of Melissa Schmidt, Finance Assistant, introduced by Jennifer Selensky, Acting Financial Director.
Good evening. Unfortunately, Melissa could not join us this evening. However, we are very excited to have her on the team, filling a vacancy that's been missed for about a year. And she has arrived just in time for our tax collection season. So we're really excited that she will be here supporting that role. Thank you.
Thank you. And item number 3 under staff updates is final comments from retiring Chief Scott Owen, introduced by Steve Barg, City Administrator.
Thank you. And after Scott has spoken, Pete Fletty would like to make a few comments as well on behalf of Scott. But I just want to start by thanking Scott for everything he's done in his career here. It's been kind of weird at City Hall lately. We've seen a few retirements and resignations in recent weeks. It's always hard to see good people go. People who've done dedicated service to the citizens, worked hard, been great team players, been a great part of the organization. It's hard. It's difficult for so many reasons. And losing Scott to retirement is right up among the top of those. So I just want to thank him and commend him for what he's done in his years with the Marshfield Fire Department and just his tireless work, and wish him well as he moves forward. Scott?
Thanks, Steve. Hopefully I'll get through this without any problems. It's been an emotional week already. Council President, Alderpersons, City Administrator Barg, city staff, and the citizens. As I get ready to head out the door of the fire station one last time, I just wanted to take a minute to thank each and every one of you for all of your support and help throughout the years. I've had a terrific career here. If you blink really quick, that's how fast I feel my career has gone. 25 years has come and gone, and I just can't believe it. I've enjoyed working with each and every one of you, especially the members of the department. We have a top-notch fire department. We have a very dedicated fire department. Very proud of the Marshfield Fire and Rescue Department and not the Ripon Fire Department, although I assume they're a very nice department as well. One last time, we got to get it in, right? Words alone cannot express how much of an honor it's been for me to serve the last 25 years. When I was in high school, I was going to either be a photographer or I was going into law enforcement. I went to Milwaukee Area Technical College for a career day, and they introduced me to the world of paramedic, and I thought it was really pretty cool. It seemed when the paramedics were talking, they pulled a needle out of their box. I swear it was that big, and that kind of brought me home right away. Even though I never became a paramedic, I've been drawn to the fire side and have really, really enjoyed it. It's with appreciation to the commission, to city staff, to all the elected and appointed officials and the citizens, that I've been able to do a job that I love and that I was committed to every day. I started with the city July 8th, 1996, which also happens to be my birthday, so it was a very good birthday present. A tradition in the fire department is on your birthday and on your anniversary, you bring treats in. It's kind of backwards, but you bring treats in. Luckily, I don't think many people knew that my anniversary was also my birthday, because that's a double treat day. So I think I got out of that more times than not. In 2008, I became a deputy chief. Deputy chief in charge of the blue shift was probably my most favorite position that I had. I had a tight-knit group of individuals on the shift. We did a lot together, on duty, off duty, and they're a great bunch of people. But, you know, looking towards my future, I knew I always wanted to be fire chief somewhere. And so in 2013, I transitioned to deputy chief at EMS, and 4 short years later, into the role of fire chief. Fire chief is a goal that I set for myself when I started in the fire service over 30 years ago, and I made it. And more importantly, I survived it. As a firefighter, relief officer, deputy chief, and the chief, I always did what I believed was in the best interest of the men and women of the fire department, the department itself, and of course the city. It truly is the boots on the ground people, the firefighters, paramedics, EMTs, that do the work. They are the ones out there every day making differences in the lives of our citizens and visitors. It's not the administration staff. We simply fight for the tools and the equipment for them to be able to do their job. Through our budget battles, and I really wish Alderman Wagner were here, through our budget battles, we've been able to do that. We didn't always see eye to eye on things when it came to the budget, but we worked through it, and we got what we needed for the department to be able to excel at what they do. I am looking forward to retirement, but I am going to miss the interaction with everyone. I'm not saying I'm going to miss the meetings, but I am going to miss the interaction. And as odd as it may sound, I always look forward to our weekly, bi-weekly department head, division head meetings. It was a time for us to come together and share and kind of catch up and see where everyone's at. My wife calls meetings coffee clutches and gab sessions, but nonetheless, I enjoy them. I leave the department knowing it is in good hands. Deputy Chief Fletty has been named the interim chief. Him and I have a lot of the same values when it comes to the department. He will continue to move the department forward until the Police and Fire Commission decide what they're going to do with my position. Collectively, between Pete, the other deputy chiefs, and every member in the organization, they will continue to make this one of the best organizations in the state. Lori Panzer, our administrative associate, I can't say enough positive things about Lori, and for those of you that have worked with Lori, you know how she is. She is my rock at the station. She knows when I'm having a bad day. She knows how to turn me around and put a smile on my face. She's got quotes every day, quotes of encouragement for the shifts. And I came in one day and I had a bad meeting or something, wasn't real happy. She handed me a piece of paper, a picture that had a turtle on his back, and talking about it was all in perspective. And that really helped me that day. That's up actually on my wall. So the hardest thing about leaving is not necessarily the job. I did a stint today with Tom Laux. You know, I think Tom had planned for about 40 minutes or so. We were in there over an hour talking. You know, it's not the job, it's the people I'm going to miss. I truly do consider each and every one of you friends. And I truly can't believe that I'm saying see you later. So with that, thank you very much.
Thank you, Scott. You're going to be missed around here. Chief Fletty.
I don't have a book like Scott did, but it is good to know you learn something every day. We've got 25 years of back treats coming, it sounds like, so that's good.
Yeah, I'll bring them in on Monday.
Tomorrow we'll do. This week's been very bittersweet for a lot of us at the fire department. I'm personally very happy for Scott. He's served the city and the citizens for the past 25 years and has earned his retirement. He's been somebody I've looked up to, a mentor, a teacher, and a friend. I know you've all known Scott as a chief who has worked hard and has had the best interests of the city and our citizens at heart. But we might not know about Scott or seen within our walls of the department as a person who cared deeply about each and every firefighter there. Scott took the time to get to know our firefighters on a personal level, and he always tried to get us what we needed to do our job at a high level. He built a personal connection with many of us and pushed us to do better, educate ourselves, and strive to do the best we can for the city and for the department. Scott has been a great leader, a person we could always trust, and has been a role model for many. Friday would be Scott's last official workday at the station. He'll be missed, and will leave a void that will be very tough to fill. I think I'm speaking for everyone here at the fire department, but and perhaps many of you know, when I say this, I wish him well in his future endeavors, and I hope he has a long, happy, and healthy retirement. Congratulations, Scott, on your upcoming retirement. It's well-deserved. We'll miss you, and thank you for everything. Thank you.
Thank you. Item F is the council president's comments. We have an employee recognition. Sam Warp, the wastewater superintendent, has been with us for 10 years. And Sam has also announced his retirement, so we are sad to see him go after only 10 years. And that's all I have for this evening. Item G is council comments. Mr. Budke.
Thank you. Marshfield lost a retired city employee, Jim Levac. Started, let me see, 1963 he started and was with the city for 28 years. Jim was 85. He was zookeeper for many years, did an awesome job. And he'll be missed. And the funeral, I believe, is Friday, December 17th, and visitation is at St. John's Church. I just want to give my condolences to Jim's family. Thank you.
Yes, on behalf of the city for all of us. Are there any other council comments? Item H is reports from commissions, boards, and committees. Any report? Seeing none, we'll move on to item I, the consent agenda, which you have before you. Entertain a motion to receive and place on file. Approving recommended action. Mr. Budke, your motion.
Motion to approve.
Okay, and a second from Mr. Rosendich. Is there any discussion on the consent agenda? I don't see any, so please vote to approve. Mrs. Spiros.
Yes.
We have, motion carries with one nay for Mr. Hendler. There were no items removed from the consent agenda, so we'll move on to item K, which is the second reading of ordinance number 1467, a request to rezone property parcel 250-2603-33-0983 from CMU Community Mixed Use to MR 24 multifamily residential for the following legally described area. Lot 4 of certified map number 10927, volume 45, page 179, document number 1186373, located in the southeast quarter of the southwest quarter of section 33, town 26 north, range 3 east, city of Marshfield, Marathon County, Wisconsin, presented by Josh Miller, Development Services Director. Josh.
Thank you, and again, I apologize for that description. Yeah, this is the second reading of the ordinance to change the zoning of the properties that's pretty much north of Walmart. It's adjacent to the SC Swiderski apartment complex. They own the property currently, and they'd be looking to develop the property for residential development. It's currently zoned CMU, which is commercially zoned. The intent of this area was really to have it zoned commercial or to develop it commercial. But it had been unsold for almost 20 years when the developer asked the city to take it over and to try to transfer it to another property owner to develop it. So the proposed zoning is MR 24, which is consistent with the comprehensive plan. Future land use map shows this is a high density development. There are some challenges with the topography, so it probably won't be developed as densely as we'd like to see it, but obviously we got to make sure that the development works from both emergency access and grading and topography. So like I said, the proposed rezoning is consistent with the comprehensive plan. This was reviewed by the Plan Commission in November. This is the second reading. And any development, if it's more than one building, would likely come back for a conditional use permit. And talking to the builder, the developer, they're probably going to be doing that in the near future. So we'll be seeing this again pretty soon here. But with that, staff would recommend approval of ordinance 1467.
Mr. Witzel, your motion.
Move to approve.
Okay, now we have a second from Mr. Fisher. Is there any comments on ordinance 1467? Seeing none, the motion is to approve the ordinance. Please vote. Mrs. Spiros?
Yes.
And that motion carried.
Thank you.
Item L is a request to approve proposed list of election inspectors and special voting deputies for a 2-year term, calendar years 2022 to 2023, presented by Deb Paul, City Clerk. Yeah.
Thank you. Every 2 years, the election inspectors need to be reappointed by this Common Council. And in your packet, I have a list of the election inspectors I'm requesting approval of. I did receive some nominations from the Republican and Democrat parties, so those are reflected separately on your list. The recommended action is to approve the list of election inspectors and special voting deputies.
Mr. Butke, your motion.
Motion to approve.
Okay, and second by Mr. Witzel. Are there any comments on the voting list? Seeing none, please vote. Mrs. Spiro. We didn't hear what your vote was.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
That motion carries. Item M is a request to approve a contract with Running Incorporated for taxi service for the calendar year 2022, presented by Steve Barg, City Administrator.
It's actually, if it's okay, Council President, I did get a request earlier today from Councilmember Spiros asking if we could flip around M and N.
Okay.
I think I shared it and I forgot to catch you before the meeting. The reason for that is because it might be beneficial to give the update on the taxi service before taking the official vote to continue with the next year of the agreement. So what I'm going to do, maybe a multi-part thing here. I see Justin from Running Incorporated, Viroqua. He's going to come up and just give a little bit of a snippet as to how the service has been working, any updates in terms of successes or challenges from his perspective. I'll come back then. Part 2 will be to kind of highlight the memo that I put in the packet with respect to the issues you've raised in the past, the financial, and also the tracking of complaints. And then we'll dive into that last issue, which is the approval of the contract year for 2022. Justin?
Thank you, Steve. Thank you for having me today. I wanted to come up and maybe answer any questions. I'm not sure if anybody has anything specifically. I know there's been, the last 18, 19 months have been certainly a challenge in our industry. But we're seeing trending ridership is going back up. I know that was an issue which resulted in lower revenues and part of, the increased expense of the service. But just through the third quarter of 21, we're up to 62,800 rides, over 55,000 from the end of the third quarter in 2020. So we're seeing good trending up. However, we're seeing hours trending down because staffing is becoming a real issue. I shouldn't say everybody, but most folks are seeing it everywhere. Every place is hiring. Wages have had to be adjusted, trying to keep up with stuff, but that's the real challenge we're facing right now with staffing. And, that translates into service issues with the customers. So folks are having to wait longer. And folks seem to be more, it's frustrating because everything is an issue everywhere. Every place you go is short staffed. So whether it's your, restaurant, you're waiting longer, the taxi, you're waiting longer. It's just been a tough year, but we've got good, dedicated people that are still working here that have been with us since the beginning. We're starting to see a small trickle of new applicants back in, but we still have a long ways to go with filling staff. So unfortunately, I don't see that something so very short term. Is there any questions that I can answer for anybody?
Mr. Bucky?
Thank you. Justin, in my district is Cedar Rail, the elderly housing. Like I've stated before, before you came in with the cab company, I used to get complaints from them. And I have not received any. But I think it's important because you will get new people in town at Cedar Rail, in Parkview, and some of the other elderly. Would you just explain the shared ride issue again? That's the difference, that a lot of the misunderstanding comes from that.
Sure. Well, and that's, the shared ride aspect of municipal transportation is something that I think is hard. It's missed by a lot of folks. So when you look at, the fare, start with the fares. The fares to ride shared ride are very inexpensive compared to what they would be on a private public or private taxi entity. So the reason those fares can be cheaper is because of the state, federal, and municipal subsidies that are received into the program to get those rates, $3, $4, $5 as opposed to, $8, $9, $10 with a private contractor. But the stipulation with that comes along is if there's two people in one spot going different, it's ride share. So if we can pick up one passenger, go a block, pick up another one, go 3 blocks, drop that one off, the likelihood of being in the cab with somebody else and sharing the ride is likely, which some people have a harder time understanding, because if you come from a big city and you get in a taxi, it's your taxi, origin to destination. Shared ride taxi isn't that. It's, we pick up and drop off the most efficient way possible, which created a problem during COVID because we went to single ride. Every ride was one household. We didn't want to have multiple households in the taxi. Front seat ridership is still discouraged. We try to maintain as much social distancing as we can in the vehicles. So the back seat is where we try to put folks. However, that's loosening up. So if somebody has a mobility issue that makes it hard to get in the back, we do allow them in the front, but we ask them to get in the back first. If they can't, we let them in the front. And we have started doing that shared ride thing again. However, if a customer is very uncomfortable with that or has a reason compelling to not do that, we do honor that request. But those are kind of, I think people are fatigued enough of COVID that they're willing to try to get back to some semblance of normal in the taxi world. So, but as we see spikes and variants and all that, we're still under a federal mask mandate, which shared ride taxis, because they receive federal funding, fall under the same guise as air travel, train travel. All of that is under the same thing. So we're under a federal mask mandate now until March. I don't know if you got that. I think it's March. So you have to wear a mask in a taxi, and there's not an option to not. It's no different than an airplane, which is creating some issues with some customers. They're mask fatigued and are looking to not wear them, but we can't. If we allow non-mask wearing folks in the cab, there's ramifications from a federal level for that, so.
I could.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm also on the Community Development Authority, and I will ask them, they probably already have it, to post it in those facilities about a shared ride versus taxi service, because like you said, there's people that come, they're used to the taxi service, so if we get the word out more, complaints will wait out, I think. So, thank you.
And early on in the process, we went to meetings at Cedar Rail and held kind of community discussions. And if we ever get back to a point where that's an acceptable practice, I'd be happy to do that and help share the message in these facilities.
Hey, Mr. Fisher.
Thank you, Council President. I have one question. You mentioned there was your short staff. That is still an issue then?
Yeah.
How short-staffed are you?
I was sitting here thinking that I was going to say that, and I knew somebody would ask me that question. I don't have the percentages, but like when you look at the apologies, this closed on me, but when you look at the amount of hours provided last year through this year, we're down from 24,200 to 22,000 hours just through the third quarter. So I don't have, I can't pin it down to shifts per day because we do our best to put people where we need to cover. But I'd be happy to get that information.
I'd like that
to
information.
Steve.
And if I may follow up.
Yes.
Another question is, one complaint I've heard from constituents is that they'll call and no one answers the phone. Is there people not in the office?
No, there is people in the office. Our phone systems are company-wide. That's a new thing we started sometime during 2020. But we identified a glitch in the system about a month ago that was causing calls to not terminate appropriately. And that's since been remedied. So if you've heard about it in the last, 3 weeks, let me know. And if you hear about it again, let me know right away. So we switched to an IP-based system. Part of our dispatch system, we're having trouble, getting folks to dispatch. So we've went to a remote dispatch option in some of our locations. So we have folks that are able to work from home and do different things like that. So with this new system, there was some glitches in it. And I was aware that there was some calls that weren't terminating appropriately.
And what is the wage right now for your driver?
There is, so the city's got it set in their contract, and I don't know what the wage for 2022 is. Right, and is that in our contract that you've got there? I want to say it's in the, I don't want to misspeak.
Can we find that out too?
Yeah.
Please?
So the city, I don't know if you're familiar with that, the city set the wage in their last RFP. There's an annual increase that's required to go in there, so it's between 10 and 11.50, somewhere in that. I can't. Direct.
Are there any other questions? Mrs. Spiros, did you have any questions? Go ahead.
Thank you. Justin, I have a couple of questions. I brought this up with Steve, and this has been, a few months now, several months now. But I just kind of wanted to follow up. I had somebody who lived in my district who was in a wheelchair, paralyzed from the chest down. And she was newly paralyzed. So she was dealing with a lot of doctor's appointments, a lot of emergency, not really emergency like you have to call 911, but emergency kind of visits into the ER for things. And that's kind of common practice when somebody goes through an injury that severe at first. And she was having a lot of problems with running and a lot of problems with your drivers. One of the issues that she had was how late your handicap vans were available. So can you tell me how late your handicap vans run at this right now?
Sure. So when we're open, there should be handicap service available. So on the hours, I'm just going to pull that up here. I apologize. So hours currently Monday through Thursday are 6 AM to midnight. And if we're open, there should be a handicapped accessible vehicle on duty at all times. And then on the weekends, it's 6 AM to 3 AM.
Okay. And then in follow-up, the biggest thing she said to me that concerned me the very, very most was that she was transported in her wheelchair and they did not buckle her wheelchair in. So her wheelchair would roll.
Okay.
When they would stop, and hit the brakes. And of course, this was frightening for her. And she, requested the driver to belt her in, and he didn't do that, or he didn't know how, or he couldn't do it properly. So what is the training process for that?
So all of our
drivers.
I apologize. All of our supervisors. So Jason here is our Marshfield supervisor. He's also one of our regional supervisors. So he's been trained in wheelchair securement training to be a train the trainer kind of a program. And all of our new hires are gone through a wheelchair securement training process. There's some documents they go through. They watch a video, then they ride with the driver. They're taught how to go ahead and secure wheelchairs. That's very bothersome to me. That's not an option in our service to not have your wheelchair properly secured. So if there's more details pertaining to like the date that happened, we can go back, we can isolate the driver and we can deal with that issue. That is an absolute unacceptable practice.
It was probably, I'm going to say it was probably at least 8-9 months ago. And I don't know if she would even know the date. And I'm just glad to hear. I really did want to inform you personally of that, to make you aware of that, because, it's obviously dangerous for the patient, but it's also a very big liability for the city. So, as long as you've corrected that and have an action plan, I'm satisfied with that.
If any members of the council or anybody in the public ever gets concerns or complaints like that, please make sure that we're made aware of them. Because in that particular instance, that's a very, very dangerous situation that we absolutely won't and cannot tolerate. We will deal with that immediately. So the sooner we know we have record of everything, we know who transported who, when, we can isolate that down and remedy that issue. So I'm very sorry for that. It's not acceptable.
Thank you.
Yep.
Are there any other questions or comments for Justin? Okay, thank you, Justin.
Thank you.
Thanks, Justin. Don't go too far away. Don't head back to, well, that was fine. I just meant don't head for Oakwood quite yet. That's what I was really thinking of. Just moving on then, you have a memo in your packet, kind of an update, and just a reminder that how we got to this point of this update. It was, I don't know, maybe a couple months ago. Council had raised a couple issues. One was maybe wanting to know a little bit more about the finances of the operation, how they've been in recent years. And then I think maybe equally important, and it was touched on a little bit with Justin here, Rebecca's question in particular, complaint tracking. What happens when we get a complaint? How is it handled? How is it processed? We know that there's been at least addressing, if not resolution, of the concern, and I want to touch on that. So just going back to my memo, you see the last 5 years of finances, revenue, and expenses. I should say again, for those who maybe don't remember, it's always good to have a refresher for people who might be tuned in at home or elsewhere, that there are 3 funding sources really for the taxi operation, the biggest of which is the federal and state grants, which cover a little bit more than half of the operation. And then obviously taxi fares paid by riders, that covers the majority of the remainder. But there's always a local share, and there's always going to be a local share. That portion that isn't picked up by the grants or the taxi fares that the city has to pick up. And I think one of the reasons why communities like Marshfield are so committed to taxi services, the group of people who participate in the taxi service certainly isn't the full 19,000 of our population, but those who take advantage of it, it's so critical to their lives. We're talking about getting to medical appointments and getting groceries and all the things it takes to be independent. So the fact that we have a local share, the fact that we have to pay something toward the taxi service is not a bad thing. We try to keep it as low as we can by adjusting fares where appropriate and working with Justin to try and control costs. But I think we've historically been committed to having a taxi service, and it's good for our residents. So hopefully we can continue that for a long time to come. So anyway, you see the 5 years of revenue expenses. I won't touch on that unless you have questions. You see that they do vary a little bit from year to year. With COVID, we had kind of a big hit in the last 18 months, but the CARES program has reimbursed us very nicely for the lost revenue from 2020. You see that there, actually revenue exceeding expense, and is estimated to do the same, again, at 100% of our expenses in 2021, again, because of the pandemic. Our grant application for 2022 shows our local share to be about $68,000. That's obviously higher than we would like. I certainly like it to be half that if possible. But that's based on ridership that's fairly conservative. And we're hoping as we come out of the pandemic, I think Justin is giving some indication that ridership is beginning to pick up again. If we get near pre-COVID, ridership will be looking good in terms of reducing that local share quite a bit. The council did also authorize an increase in taxi fares that will go into effect on January 1st, right around the corner here, to $3 for seniors and people with disabilities, and from $8 up to $10 on the agency fares paid by the home health type organizations. And that will help us as well to offset some of the costs. Having said that, inflation is rising for the taxi service as it is for all of us at our homes and our businesses. And it's going to be a challenge to try and keep that in check. Another option that we want to look at and especially dive into as we get into early 2022 is the idea of maybe changing the hours of operation. We have a lot of hours. We have some evening hours as you get farther into the night that have fewer riders. The idea being maybe that we can adjust some of those driver hours and move them into the higher revenue producing hours when we have wait times. One of the things council I know doesn't like historically when I've been here is people waiting too long for a ride, sitting at the clinic, sitting at Pick and Save, and not being picked up in a timely manner. So it may help us produce more revenue and be more user-friendly in terms of meeting the customer's needs to do that. We want to explore that in the first quarter of 2022. On the complaint side, Amy Krogman is here. She's the point person in terms of getting these complaints, works with Jason at Marshfield Public Transit and the folks down in Baroka, Justin and his team, to try and make sure that concerns and complaints are addressed. Sometimes it's hard. I know Amy could tell you that if she was standing here, that we sometimes get them anonymously, or we only get a certain amount of information that makes it difficult to follow up on the complaint. Sometimes they're not always timely either. The complaint might be something that happened quite a while ago, which makes it a little bit harder to figure out what transpired. But she does work with the running staff to try and get a resolution back, get back to the customer. Somebody does, to let them know what happened. Sorry, we can do better next time, or here's what we found out when we investigated the problem, and that'll help us for the future. Hopefully they'll remain a regular rider of Marshfield Public Transit. You can't always make everybody happy. I think anybody who's ever been in business or government knows that, but the goal is to try and address and resolve as many of those complaints as we can, and they are being tracked. So we'll have a record of what's happened in the past. So that's kind of a look at what what I want to touch on based on what I heard from the council back in, I think it was maybe October, sometime in there. Any questions for either me or Justin, or maybe that even Amy can help with if it's related to the type of complaints we get and how we handle them?
Mr. Butke.
Maybe Amy could just give us a number of complaints, no details necessary that you've had.
The number of complaints has drastically reduced. We get maybe one every 2 months. So either they're not coming to me, or they're maybe calling their alderperson now, or they're complaining to someone, but I just seriously do not get very many complaints at all.
And actually, that's why I called you up here, because I figured that. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
And I think if I could add to Amy's answer, that does kind of go back to what was said earlier. I think, Justin, you guys took over about 8 years ago, something like that. And when running first took over, there were more complaints, there were issues that came up that they had to work through in terms of wait times and some of the things, even learning the city, the drivers and the management getting familiar with Marshfield, Wisconsin. But it didn't take real long. They've been very customer service focused. They've been very good at addressing concerns and complaints. And overall, I can't say enough good things about where they've handled the taxi service. I go long periods of time without hearing anything brought to my attention. And in the old days, whatever the old days are, going back quite a few years, I would have heard either about them directly, or I would have heard more likely rumors about people who weren't getting service. That's pretty rare now.
Mrs. Spiros, you had a comment?
I'm sorry, I just have a follow-up to something Adam asked, and I know it's kind of out of line, but out of order. But do the drivers, do they receive tips? Because I'm just very concerned about that very low wage.
So they certainly can, you know, there are passengers that do tip, but that's not something that they work off of. So it's not something that they don't advertise in the vehicle for tips. And that's one of the shared ride things, you know, that's kind of been discouraged, if you will, over the industry, over all the years we've been in it. It's not something that's not allowed, but it's not a common practice for people to tip. And if they do, it's, you know, a quarter or 50 cents or something at lines.
Can I follow up?
Yes.
So, you know, I know you didn't have the exact wage or whatever, but you kind of gave a ballpark. What can we do to improve that wage? I mean, you know, people, you're right. You know, everybody needs employees. I would find it really hard to imagine you can get very many employees if their wage is $11 an hour. It's not a livable wage.
Right. So the problem, if I may, I don't want to speak when that's an issue we're having system-wide. So as systems are coming up for rebid, there was just one of our contracts that was put up for rebid in December for 2022. That service hour increase was, I want to say, somewhere around the $4 an hour range, and that was to increase the driver wages by $4 an hour. So with those particular drivers in that particular city have the potential to get up to 14 because that's what that market, what we're losing them at. Problem with that is this is a competitively procured system. So our competitors, there's no, you know, Marshfield is the first and only shared ride taxi system in the state that has put a minimum wage in their taxi procurement, which I'm greatly thankful for. And I would love to see that number increase because that essentially levels the playing field. You know, if we bid it to say pay the employees $15 an hour and our competitor comes in and all other things, you know, insurance, gas, those types of things are equal, but they decide that they're going to try to fill the position with $8 an hour drivers, their per hour rate's going to be lower. And because of the way you're forced to score your procurement, we could lose that even if that was desirable to the municipality. So when your next procurement comes along, I encourage the municipality to look at that wage and try to determine, you know, where they want their taxi drivers paid regardless of who your provider is. I'd hate to lose this contract to somebody that thinks they're going to get people for $8 an hour because you're not. And if you are, the level of dedication you get for that isn't quality enough to serve your folks. But if we lost it to a company that was going to come in here and pay $15 an hour, I would welcome that because the people certainly deserve it. But competitively procured transit systems, that's the mercy of that game. If you don't set the minimum wage, that's the easiest place for bidders to come in and say, you know, their gas costs the same as mine does, but if they can buy employees for less than we can, or think they can, that's the problem. That was a horrible answer, by the way, but it's the truth of it.
I'm not 100% following you, but I will say that I don't like those low wages. I agree with everything you said. If you want dedicated employees and you want them to work better, you know, sometimes you have to pay them more. And I don't know how to get to that point, but I'm just going to leave it at that for now. That
if I can just add one more thing with that, pre-COVID, the majority of our employees across the state were like second income and retired folks that were looking for a little extra income. Post-COVID, a lot of those folks decided they didn't need that extra income bad enough to risk their health by being out in the public working an 8-hour shift. So we've lost that category of employee in the majority of our municipalities. So now we're depending on people who it may be their second job or are just trying to work something just, you know, not their career per se, but they're just looking to work and make a little extra money. So that's been a fundamental change in the system. You used to be able to get drivers for $10 an hour because people were just looking to get out of the house. You know, somebody retires at 60 and are not ready to, you know, like the chief here, he's welcome to come on and drive taxi whenever he likes. We'd be happy to have him. But we've really lost that category of employee. We still have some, but it's not as many of them out there as there used to be. So.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Butke.
Thank you. I agree with Rebecca, and I just had a very short conversation with Steve to what we can do on that. And I think we have to look at that to try to get the wages up there and set a minimum and go from there. You know, there's things involved there with state grants, so on and so forth, but I'm sure Steve will, you already said that you would like to look at wages in the next contract. I believe you said that.
I don't remember saying it exactly that way. But
No.
what I would say is I do share the concern that Rebecca, Tom, and you and others are raising. I mean, certainly, if you want to, like in any business or government, if you want to get good people and keep them very long, you have to pay, you know, competitive wages. And you talk about in this environment, we all speak in this building every day about how McDonald's and Culver's and others are paying $15 an hour, and you know, the bar has been raised whether we want it to be or not. So this is definitely something we need to talk about and look at how we can get to at least a better place if we can.
And that is how you said it.
Mr. Fisher.
Did I hear you say people are working 8-hour shifts, right?
I
So,
did say
I
8
guess my
hours, but
question is are the employees mostly part-time? Do you have any full-time?
there's a mixture of part and full-time. I can get those detailed numbers for you if you'd like that.
Yeah, I would like a lot of that information because it obviously sounds like there's an issue, and not blaming your or your company, but I'd like to see a better snapshot of what they're earning, what benefits they have, if any, so I have more information to work with. Thank you.
You bet.
Mr. Butke again.
Just one more comment. You singled out the retiring fire chief, but as Steve alluded to, I believe you said that we have 5 or 6 other employees retiring, so.
We'll take them all.
Send an application.
We'll take them all. Yes, yes.
I'm being credited with a lot of things tonight. I'm not sure if I've actually said them, but if you want to call Sam Warp and others, go for it. He'll be on it, yeah.
Any further questions or comments? Okay, Steve, now we'll go back to item M.
Thank you. Thanks. So now we do go back to the need to approve a contract for the next year. Again, this gets kind of confusing because we always talk about the RFP we do for 5 years, but there's still, according to the DOT, we have to do an annual contract. So we are now headed into, I believe it's the 4th year of the 5-year agreement, and we need to re-up for another year. The agreement is in your agenda packet, and staff would recommend approval of contracting with Running Incorporated for calendar year 2022 for shared ride taxi service to the citizens of Marshfield.
Mr. Butke, your motion.
Motion to approve.
Okay, and Mr. Varsho seconds that. Is there any further comments on the taxi service? The motion is to approve the contract for 2022. All in favor, please vote on your machine.
Yes.
Thank you. And that motion passes.
Thank you.
Item O is suggested items for future agendas. Mr. Henley.
Thank you, Council President. At the last Finance, Budget, and Personnel Committee meeting, at the tail end of that particular meeting, and I couldn't find it in the minutes, but we raised a question with Mr. Park about an item that I think we need to address here as a council, is the item on the dealing with the tax issue. And in it, I would like to make sure that Mr. Barr bring this up to the council at the next meeting. I think it's an important item because we're dealing with items to bring the council up to date, but also who's negotiating and who should be in addition to the negotiation. So I hope to see that item on the council meeting next week.
Yes,
Thank you very much.
yes, we discussed that this morning, and we'll get that on the agenda. Mr. Fisher?
Thank you. I have a request as well. I had a constituent, call me concerned that certain meetings are not being filmed, such as the Utility Commission, Economic Development Board. So I would love for Tom Laux to give a presentation as to why, and give an update as to why those meetings are not being recorded, and if they could be recorded in the future.
Okay. Mr. Hendler, you have an additional item, or is that an old?
No, that's it.
Okay, you showed up on my screen again. Any other items for future agendas? Okay, Mr. Whistle, you have a motion.
To adjourn.
And a second by Mr. Rosendich. Please vote.
Yes.
He wants to stay.
And we're adjourned.